Order 66, the fourth book in the Republic Commando series by Karen Traviss, was the first and only novel in the series to get a hardcover release, presumably banking off of people's interest in that infamous contingency order. Now, it is true that 4 of the Republic Commando books were released by the Science Fiction Book Club in omnibus book club editions. Volume 1 included Hard Contact and 000, and Volume 2 included True Colors and Order 66. Order 66, a Republic Commando novel by Karen Traviss, ultimately made it to number 12 on the New York Times bestseller list for the week of October 5th, 2008. As with the rest of the books in these series, I had never read Order 66 before. I was somewhat intrigued to do so, though, because a number of people had told me that they liked the Republic Commando series, or they enjoyed it up to Order 66. And since for me, I feel like Hard Contact was really the best of the bunch thus far, that made me very curious to see why. So first, a brief summary. As the Clone Wars wage on, Sergeant Kal Skirata continues his efforts to prepare a better future for his clone sons and a way out from the Grand Army of the Republic. But as Skirata prepares an exit strategy, Palpatine has plans of his own brewing, leading to the unfolding of his new galactic empire. Order 66 has a problem that a lot of the Star Wars books have, where the blurb doesn't really match up to the book itself. Blurbs are meant to draw people in, they're meant to be promo in a way, so it's not surprising that the blurb isn't accurate, but I think the key thing that you should note here, going into Order 66, is that Order 66 itself makes up a very small part of this book. My paperback copy has 467 pages, and Order 66 doesn't start until page 375. So what is the plot of Order 66 then? Well, it's sort of a hodgepodge of things. Most of the book is Kal Skirata making his preparations for when he's gonna pull his boys out. They're acquiring funds, they're acquiring resources. All the work that's been done by Bethany Wesson, a treasury auditor who's involved with Ordo, the Null ARC trooper, comes to an end as Palpatine's forces sort of zero in on people been digging around in the financials. Personal revelations are finally made clear as Etain finally tells Darmin about their child. Skirata adopts even more boys, and those boys start to get married in very nonchalant Mandalorian ceremonies. And Skirata finally sets a date that they are pulling out 1,090 days after the Battle of Geonosis. But of course, in the meantime, we have the Battle of Kashyyyk, we have the Battle of Coruscant, Separatist forces arriving, kidnapping Palpatine, and Grievous fleeing to Utapau, and of course, Palpatine issuing Order 66. After Order 66, the remaining chapters of the book are basically the fallout of multiple decisions made during that time. And I think a lot of plot threads are definitely left dangling for book number 5, Imperial Commando, to pick up on. So let's talk about our characters, because oh boy, are there a bunch of them in this book again. For Omega Squad, we get Darmin's viewpoint. For Delta Squad, we get Scorch's viewpoint. We of course get Bethany and Ordo and Kal Skirata and Etain and the now former Jedi Bardan Jusik. There's also all these other characters running around as well. The other 5 Nulls, the other guys in Omega Delta Squad. We've got other Mandalorian warriors who trained the clones Commando, who are now allied with Skirata, and some of them in the Etain. There's Bethany, her colleague who gets arrested. Kal Skirata's biological daughter, who was working for the Separatists. Bardan Jusik finds Jango Fett's mad older sister in the same asylum. There's a Separatist doctor from Hard Contact who was making the virus to target clone troopers. There's Jedi Master's Age. I mean, there are a lot of characters in this book. I'm not even scratching the surface here. So let's talk about Etain first, because as happened in the previous books, I think that Etain irritated me more than anyone else in this entire novel. On the plus side, she finally told Darmin that they have a child, which was a plot point I took great issue with beginning in 000. Anyway, she finally tells him about it. He is very upset with Kal Skirata, as I would be. I'm not sure that I would beat him up. And he's not really mad at Etain. He's very happy about learning about Cad's existence. He can't wait for the war to end, for Etain to leave the Jedi Order, for them to be together as a family, only for that to go completely haywire towards the end of the book. Etain is continuing to struggle with what she thinks about the Jedi Order. She does not want them to steal her child. We'll talk about that in the issues section. She wants to help the clones to speak up for their welfare, which is what's keeping her within the Jedi Order. And she encounters Callista and other Jedi trained by Master Altus, who have come to join the war effort, and these renegade Jedi seem more up her alley, that they don't have the rules against attachment that the Jedi Order has, and so she's interested in reaching out to them and learning if she could coexist within this group. Etain is on Kashyyyk while Delta Squad is there, but Kal Skirata's Wookiee friend Inaka pulls her out. This is one thing where what happens on Kashyyyk also happened in the Republic Commando video game, but Etain was not there. Etain was not their commanding officer, I think, because I've only played the first level of the game, that the person giving them orders and information and help is another clone. And I didn't like how Etain was pulled out of the battle. She didn't even really seem to have a choice here. It was just, Skirata said this is the time, and so Inaka pulled her out, and then she's okay with it, and she gets a message from Darman, which is the Mandalorian wedding vows, and she sends them back to him, and that's enough to make them married. Good for them. Anyway, she lands on Coruscant, and right as she lands on Coruscant, Order 66 is issued. And this is where, more than anything, Etain really bothered me, because there are all sorts of people who are like, we'll come and pick you up, Etain. And she's like, no, I'm just gonna walk through Coruscant to the rendezvous point. If they're offering a ride, take them up on it. She also packs her bag, and she knows at this point that they're looking for a Jedi, but she still packs her lightsaber and her old master's lightsaber because she can't leave them behind. And she's thinking, well, I've already sent in my resignation to the Jedi Order, so they're not gonna detain me. I was honestly expecting that some sort of confrontation was going to occur because she had those lightsabers in her bag, but no, what happens to Etain is even dumber than that. She's coming up to some checkpoint where they're looking in people's bags and stuff, and Darman and Niner and like Ordo and other people were on the other side of the checkpoint, and they can see her coming, and then the checkpoint finds 3 Padawans who pull their lightsabers, and Etain puts herself between a clone trooper and one of the Padawans and is like, don't you dare kill him, don't kill him, and the Padawan slices her to death and she dies. And all I could think was, Etain, that was the dumbest death I've ever seen. No joke, when I was reading this book, I got to the end of the chapter, the very short 3-page chapter, where Etain died, and I closed the book, and my only thought was, you idiot. Why? I guess she went out protecting the clones that she loved. But if those clones at that point in time knew that she was a Jedi, even a former Jedi, they would have murdered her. It's in keeping with her character, because Etain's always making dumb decisions, but what a way to go. In Omega Squad, Phi's replacement Core makes a lot of snarky comments about political stuff. Etain gets married to his Twi'lek lady, good for him. Niner is still struggling between following orders, being the leader, and what he wants to do. The only reason he seems to go along with Omega Squad leaving for Mandalore with Kal's forces is because everyone else in Omega Squad goes along with it. But then during that silly confrontation at the checkpoint, Niner falls and he breaks his spine, and Darman goes down, and to juxtapose what had happened with Delta Squad on Kashyyyk, he stays with him. So Kor and Etain make it to Mandalore, and Niner and Darman are now stuck on Coruscant, and that's where we're gonna see them, I guess, in book number 5, is that they are now conscripted into the Empire, and Niner's like, you should have left me, and Darman's like, I never leave a brother. I feel very bad for Darman, who finally found out he has a son, had talked to Etain about wanting to have more children. I guess they're married if all it takes is sending someone a text message and they reply with a text message. But now his wife is dead, his child is gone, and he's trapped. Delta Squad's going through some similar but different issues. Since we're in Scorch's head, we see how much the war is affecting him and how much he's falling apart under the sheer pressure of being ordered into conflict after conflict after conflict without any break. And I think we also see how different their training under Sergeant Vau was compared to Omega Squad, because on Kashyyyk, when they are ordered to pull back and they realize Sev isn't with them, they sort of argue about it, but they all agree that they're ordered, they have to pull out, and so they leave Sev behind. And his fate is rather up in the air. Is he dead? Is he captured? We don't know. I thought that they were going to get pulled into Order 66 on Kashyyyk, but in fact we don't see Delta Squad again after they have to leave Sev behind until the second to last chapter, when they are now also recalled on Coruscant, and they're still questioning the decisions that they made. Of the Null ARC troopers, we see pretty much all of them, but we're only really in Ordo's head. One of them is off keeping an eye on General Grievous, one of them is still running around sabotaging factories, and the other ones are coming and going at will. Ordo mostly is serving as Kal Skirata's man on the ground. He's the one that's on Coruscant running around doing things. Killing an intelligence agent who's following Bethany, marrying Bethany, having Bethany pull out and move to safety, and then he's also involved with several of those recovery missions where they get Bethany's colleague Zilka out of wrongful detention, and then they also spring Kal Skirata's daughter, Rusan, and they eventually spring the separatist doctor, Etain, during the confusion of the Battle of Coruscant. Ordo definitely has some trauma regarding his upbringing, and I think that all the Nulls are decidedly renegade, because in the end, their allegiance isn't to the Republic, it's to Skirata, and when he says pull out, they all pull out. When Order 66 is issued, they don't participate at all. They still have a decidedly cocky mindset, and some of the things that they said bothered me, but I'll touch on those more in the issues section. Kal Skirata adopts even more boys and adopts Etain after she died, and really seems to want to have the biggest family in existence. I do like that Order 66 really emphasized the fact that Skirata's not a good guy, he's not a lawful guy, but maybe his best aspect is that he really loves the dudes under his charge. I think so much of what bothered me in books 2 and 3 was how Skirata was held up to be like the absolute best of the best. And while I don't think that lessened here, I just liked anyone admitting that Skirata has some bad points, because this dude really does seem to have this very charismatic personality that just draws people into his orbit. It's like he finds people who have a hole and he's like, my group can fill it for you, which is good of him, but also feels somewhat cult-like, and that's the part that worries me. Sergeant Vau also continues on this melting, softening phase, which I'm not crazy about because I like the differences between him and Skirata, that he was just like this very cold person, a good trainer, but too harsh on the guys under his command. But it seems like everyone that interacts with Skirata gets more Skirata-like. And then they almost end up sounding like this hive mind where everyone thinks the same, everyone talks the same. And I just miss that variety of voices that we got, because it's very samey now. And I really feel like Karen Travis's rhetoric against the Jedi was turned up to 11 in Order 66, because we have Bardan Jusik, who left the Jedi Order at the end of book number 3, True Colors, and is now wholly sucked up into Kal Skirata's Mandalorian world, which almost felt to me like he exchanged one very stringent code for another, which I'm not sure is the healthiest approach. And Bardan and others just seem so dismissive of the Jedi. And I think that really comes across in how characters treat Jedi Master Zay. I always felt like Jedi Master Zay was trying to work with Skirata, who has the welfare of clones in mind, who was given a job that maybe they necessarily wouldn't want to have taken as the head of special operations, but is trying to do it to the best of his ability. But the amount of just detest and hatred that is spewed about Zay doesn't seem to be made up by the few times where they're like, well, actually, he's an okay guy. We get the idea that Jango Fett agreed to be the template for the clone army because only Jango's family are strong enough to kill Jedi. What? I didn't think that Jango knew anything about that use of the clones. I don't know. That's an interesting retcon. We get little epigraphs at the beginning of the chapters where just clones are talking about the Jedi with such disgust and being like, if I'd known they were a traitor, I would have killed them earlier. And I guess I never got this sense of hatred towards the Jedi from the clones. I will be the first to say that the prequel trilogy Jedi have distinct problems, but I wasn't expecting this level of animosity from the clones towards them. So my first issue with Order 66 was that I feel like this book is mistitled because such a very small part of it is about Order 66 that it's basically only like 30 pages is Order 66, and none of our characters that we follow carry out Order 66. They're just sort of there while it happens. Etain's death isn't even because of Order 66. It's not because she's found out as a Jedi and executed. It's because she's in the wrong place at the wrong time and tried to step between a desperate Jedi Padawan and a clone trooper. More than anything, Order 66 seems to be about the last 6 months or so of the Clone Wars, but it felt like so little of the story is actually focused on the Clone Wars itself and more focused on the completely unrelated things that Kal Skirata is doing. The actual parts of the Clone Wars are relatively few and far between in this book. We have Omega Squad on a world taking out a rebel leader, and then they're ambushed, and then they're taken to safety, and then those rebels bomb the cafeteria that they and Delta Squad are in, and then we have the Battle of Kashyyyk, but that's basically it for like actual Clone Wars stuff. I'm not sure why they called this book Order 66 other than the name recognition. People going, oh, I remember Order 66. That was shocking. Let me learn more about it. If that's why you're reading this book, no. It's so small and you don't get any insights into it. And you don't even see characters carrying it out, really. There's very little of their reasoning behind it other than it's an order. And in fact, most of these characters ignore that order. My second issue with Order 66 was the attitude of the clones and some of the things they said. Not just this immense hatred for Jedi, but also the way that they would talk about and treat others who weren't clones or weren't in Kal Skirata's group, all of a sudden they're referring to non-clone Army or Navy officers or enlisted people as mongrels. Ordo did it, the Omega Squad guys did it, and there's a lot of emphasis on the superiority of the clones, how they are the best warriors and the best men, and they have a superior genotype. And I think that combined with calling normal people mongrels had like a weird eugenics vibe to me that made me feel really weird reading this book. I don't know that I would have gone so far as denigrating normal people like that. I could see how some of them might have that viewpoint, but the fact that multiple of these guys talked like that and it just went unremarked upon by others made me very uncomfortable here. I think it's a similar way how upsetting I found it reiterated again and again that they're hiding Cad because if the Jedi Order knew about him, they would take him away, they would kidnap him. And I was like, that's not how the prequel Jedi Order worked. I feel that if they were to have uncovered what Etain did, that she had a relationship with a clone commando and had a child and is hiding that, they're not going to steal her child from her. They're probably going to ask her to leave the Jedi Order, and it would be her choice if she wanted her child to be a Jedi. And that's clearly not her choice, so they're not going to take him from her. But this is something that we've seen reiterated in the previous books, where I feel like it's this misconception of the Jedi that they steal children when everything I've seen says to the contrary. So I can see Etain concealing her child because she doesn't feel ready to leave the Jedi Order, but not concealing her child because they're going to abduct him. No. Finally, my last issue with Order 66 is just that I feel like the book isn't structured well. Part of that ties into they shouldn't have called it Order 66, but it felt like a lot of the book was Kal Skirata's preparations and character development and also introducing new characters as well. I felt like some of the battles that we got were exciting and I wanted more of that. I think this is a consequence of what we saw in books 2 and 3, where there are so many characters and so many connections between characters and relationships and interpersonal stuff that the book gets bogged down with that. And again, that's why Hard Contact was my favorite, because we've just got a few characters. It felt lean, it felt fast-paced, and that's something that I feel has been lacking either in part or in whole from the subsequent books. So much of especially the end of Order 66 is just setting up plot lines for a sequel, and that just 100% affects the pace for me. So in short, Order 66 continues the adventures of Kal Skirata and his many clone lads. Very little of the book is the actual Clone Wars ensuing, and most of it is Kal Skirata's personal agenda about how to prepare things so that he can pull all his boys out at the given time. I think if you're very invested in these characters, there's a lot of developments here, but I have to say, as a book supposedly about Order 66, that is such a small part of the book. And in fact, I think was the book's greatest misstep because it just is barely portrayed. And sort of seems like just an excuse to kill off Etain. Not many things are concluded at the end, and there seems to be a lot of threads left dangling for book number 5, Imperial Commando 501st. So next time I'm going to be reading a novel by Matthew Stover set a year after Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker and the Shadows of Mindor.